The Spruce Goose. Commissioned during the Second World War, this massive flying boat was built almost entirely from wood, since wartime restrictions limited access to aluminum for anything outside direct military production. Designed to carry hundreds of troops across the Atlantic without risking submarine attacks, the aircraft grew into the largest flying boat ever constructed, with a wingspan longer than a football field. Its wooden construction earned it a dismissive nickname from critics who doubted such a large aircraft could ever leave the water. By the time it was finished, the war had already ended, removing its original purpose entirely. In 1947, the designer personally piloted it on its only flight, skimming barely above the water for about a mile before landing again. It never flew again, spending the rest of its existence in storage and later as a museum display. What makes it remarkable is that something built to prove a point flew exactly once, just long enough to settle the argument. The Antonov An-225. Built by the Soviet Union in the late 1980s, this aircraft was designed for one very specific purpose: carrying an entire space shuttle orbiter on its back to launch sites across the country. Engineers stretched an existing heavy transport design wider and longer, adding extra engines until it became the largest aircraft ever built by weight and wingspan. Its enormous size demanded a reinforced fuselage capable of supporting external cargo mounted directly on top, an unusual configuration compared to typical cargo planes carrying weight internally. Only one fully completed example ever flew regularly, since the program that justified its existence collapsed alongside the Soviet Union itself shortly after. The aircraft found a second life, decades later, hauling oversized industrial cargo no other plane could manage. It was destroyed during fighting near Kiev in 2022, ending the story of a machine originally built to carry spacecraft. What made it unique was this dual identity, a Cold War space tool that outlived its purpose by becoming an irreplaceable heavy hauler. Caproni Ca.60. Built in Italy shortly after the First World War, this aircraft attempted something almost no other design has seriously tried, stacking 9 separate wings across 3 sets of triple-tiered structures to carry over 100 passengers across the Atlantic. Engineers believed multiplying wing surfaces would generate enough lift for an aircraft heavier than anything flying at the time, compensating for engines far weaker than modern standards. During its only test flight in 1921, the enormous wooden structure rose briefly before pitching downward and breaking apart on landing, destroying the aircraft completely. No second prototype was ever built, and the ambitious triple-wing design was abandoned as fundamentally unstable. What makes this aircraft memorable is not its performance, but its sheer boldness, an attempt to solve a lift problem by simply adding more wings rather than better engineering. The Vought V-173. Nicknamed the Flying Pancake for its nearly circular shape, this experimental aircraft was developed by the United States Navy during the 1940s to test whether an extremely wide disc-like wing could allow very short takeoffs and slow, stable flight. Its unusual shape eliminated the traditional narrow wing entirely, instead using the whole body of the aircraft to generate lift. Test pilots found it remarkably difficult to stall since the wide, flat shape kept airflow attached, even at very low speeds where conventional aircraft would drop from the sky. Despite promising handling characteristics, the concept never advanced beyond prototype testing, as jet propulsion soon made the entire approach obsolete. What made it stand apart was how completely it abandoned the familiar silhouette of an airplane in pursuit of a single engineering advantage. The Bartini Beriev VA-14. Developed in the Soviet Union during the late 1960s, this aircraft was designed to combine 3 roles nobody had successfully merged before, functioning as a seaplane, a vertical takeoff jet, and a ground effect vehicle skimming just above water. Its wide catamaran-style hull was meant to rest on the ocean surface, while inflatable pontoons helped it float before takeoff. Engineers envisioned it hunting submarines by taking off from remote stretches of ocean, but the vertical lift engines needed for this role were never successfully completed. Only one aircraft was ever built, and it flew using conventional takeoff methods instead of its intended vertical launch system. The project quietly ended after its lead designer passed away, leaving the unfinished aircraft abandoned at an airfield for years. What makes it unusual is how much ambition it packed into a single airframe. attempting to be three very different machines at once. The Akronoplan. Built by the Soviet Union throughout the Cold War, this massive vehicle flew only a few meters above open water, exploiting a cushion of air trapped between its wings and the surface to achieve far greater efficiency than a conventional aircraft. Western intelligence analysts who first spotted satellite images nicknamed it the Caspian Sea Monster, uncertain whether they were looking at a boat or a plane. Its design allowed it to carry heavy military cargo at speeds rivaling aircraft, while staying too low for most radar systems to detect easily. Because it depended on ground effect, it could only operate over relatively flat expanses like open sea, unable to climb to normal cruising altitude like a standard plane. Several prototypes were tested, though the program shrank considerably after the Soviet collapse. What set it apart was this deliberate refusal to choose between flying and sailing, existing permanently in the narrow space between both. The Rutan Model 202 Boomerang. Designed by an American aerospace engineer in the late 1990s, this aircraft looked strikingly lopsided with two fuselages of different lengths mounted asymmetrically on a single wing structure. The unusual layout was not an aesthetic choice, but a calculated response to a long-standing problem in twin-engine aircraft, where losing one engine mid-flight creates uneven thrust that can send a plane spiraling out of control. By deliberately offsetting the fuselages and engines, the designer balanced the aircraft so that losing either engine produced far less dangerous handling than in conventional twin-engine designs. Only one example was ever built, serving primarily as a flying demonstration of the underlying safety concept rather than a commercial product. Pilots who flew it described handling that felt surprisingly stable despite its strange appearance. What makes it distinctive is that its odd, asymmetrical shape was never about looks at all, but a direct visual solution to a genuine safety flaw found in more ordinary designs. Sud Aviation Caravelle with reverse-mounted engines. Introduced in the 1950s, this early commercial jetliner broke from convention by mounting its engines at the rear of the fuselage rather than beneath the wings, a placement almost unheard of in earlier jet design. Engineers wanted a quieter cabin for passengers, reasoning correctly that pushing engine noise behind the wings and away from the main body would make a noticeable difference in comfort. The rear-mounted layout also allowed for a cleaner, uninterrupted wing shape, improving aerodynamic efficiency during flight. Though it seemed like an odd departure at the time, the configuration proved so effective that it quickly influenced the design of numerous jetliners that followed across the industry. What made it stand out originally was how counterintuitive the placement seemed, moving something as vital as the engines away from their expected position purely to solve a passenger comfort problem nobody else had prioritized.